and there must be more. And I said, no, I've written one book and I've told the whole story and that's the end of it. Well, when 3 people say the same thing to you in 3 weeks, that's an inner prompting. Mm-hmm. So I said to myself, okay, if I don't listen to my inner promptings, I don't know what I'll be missing. So I decided that I could, put some of my, because I've got hundreds of thousands of words of written communication notes from my communing with Jesus.
Yeah. Let me ask you more questions, because I got a long list. And
okay, yes.
Maybe.
Please.
What is the best and the worst that spirituality brought to your life?
Well, there's no worst, it's all best. And even things that turn up looking like adversity are actually opportunity. And these are brought to us by the Holy Spirit, or the Spirit of Truth, because we've called them into our presence from a part of our mind that isn't consciously aware, and He delivers them. But fear, which is what this world is all about, the consciousness of fear, causes us to see things upside down. So what is actually opportunity, we wrap it in a wrapper called adversity. Well, what I have been told from Spirit is that everything that turns up is always opportunity. And if we can choose to look beyond the wrapper of adversity and open to accept it as the gift that it actually is, then we can start to see past the adversity, from which most of us want to run away and hide. Oh, I don't want this. That's just the way it's supposed to be in this ridiculous game we're playing of separation.
What would you recommend people who start this path?
Trust. As Michael was saying today, trust is vital. And most of us don't trust ourselves, let alone anyone else. Well, when Jesus manifested to me, I was completely transformed into unconditional love and trust. And I trusted Jesus totally. And so I've been able to follow Him, and He has said to me over the years things that at the time I didn't understand and that I thought couldn't be true because the world didn't seem to be harmonizing with the things that He would say to me. But because He had said them and I trusted Him totally, I knew that what He was saying was true, even though I didn't understand it. And there's nothing He's ever said to me that has not turned out to be true over 50 years.
Okay. What is the most common mistake you see nowadays in people pursuing a spiritual path?
I think it is that they're darting in all directions, looking for something out there. The kingdom of heaven is within us, and we have to go within to find the truth. And that's where we meet with Jesus and with the Holy Spirit, and indeed with the Creator Spirit, God. This is the within. People don't understand what the within really is all about, so they're out there looking in the outer world for this guru or that spiritual teacher to tell them the path that they should be on. Well, the path that we're on is set out for us before we incarnate. We choose it. We decide our journey. Then the path of incarnation is a downward descent into forgetfulness. When a new baby is born, it knows nothing. It's forgotten everything and has to start from square one. And so by adolescence, the journey starts an upward ascent back to a spiritual awakening. For most people, they don't know what this means, and so they shun it because fear rules their life. But for those who are ready and who've decided before they incarnate that I want to come back into an embodied state on a mission to help people to awaken, then they have guides, loved ones in the realms of light, who will give them little hints along the way to keep them on track. Mm-hmm. This is all voluntary, there's no compulsion. It's all by voluntary agreement. And if we're not ready for that, then they never push.
Okay. What was your greatest feat or your infallible trick in your spiritual path?
My greatest feat or infallible trick, gosh. I have to come back to this word trust, because when we entrust our life into the care, guidance and protection of Jesus, then we surrender our own control over our life into that care, and our journey then becomes effortless. That doesn't mean that we don't face worldly hardship and temptation and difficulty, but we are helped to move through them, and we grow by that hardship, by that adversity, by that difficulty.
Did you have many ups and downs in your path? How does one get out of the downs and the blockings?
Well, I met Teresa in 1968, my wife. We've been together over 50 years now. And she embodied into a family where there was, it was very dysfunctional, and there was a lot of abuse in that family. When we came together, she had no sense of self-worth, and I couldn't understand what lack of self-worth meant. And so our relationship went through some very difficult times, but we both knew that in the care of Jesus, our troubles would be moved through. And so we've moved through those difficulties. We experience difficulties so that we can help other people who are having difficulties to know how to deal with them. And it's very important, if we're here on a Christ mission to help other people to awaken from the dream of separation, we've got to be able to understand what they're experiencing, and we can only do that by having them ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Which books were key in your development?
Well, the Bible for many years, and then in 2005, A Course in Miracles. Are you familiar with that book? Yes, so as soon as I picked up A Course in Miracles, I knew on page 1 that this was the same Jesus that had manifested to me in 1967 and had been leading me on my journey to wakefulness during that period. It was the same voice speaking. Mm. So Teresa and I have been studying A Course in Miracles, which has confirmed many of the things that we'd been taught and experienced since 1968.
Okay. As a child, were you different from the rest?
I had some mystical experiences that I couldn't share with anyone, and I never shared them with anyone at all until I wrote them in this first book. One of them, the most significant one, was when I was, and this went on for about 3 or 4 years, between the age of about 6 or 7 and about 9 or 10. And we lived on a farm out in the middle of a forest in the south of England. And so there was woodland all around our house, and I felt something building up inside me, in my heart and soul, where I needed to commune with something. I didn't know what. I realized many years, decades later, that this was with God. And so I had to go away from everybody else, out into the woods where there was nobody else around, and that any other contact, human contact, would be an impediment, would be interfering. And even the very clothes on my body were an impediment. So I had to take all my clothes off and stand there, reaching up to heaven, tears streaming down my face, communing. I didn't know what that meant, but there was this overwhelming build-up of desire for knowing the reality of eternity. And it wasn't until after I met Olga Park, 15 years or so later, that I began to understand what that was all about. And Jesus told me later on, decades later, that that was a reminder to me, because when we come into an embodied state, we forget. So he had given me these experiences as a little reminder to keep me seeking, moving in the right direction, back toward the light.
Mm-hmm. How would you raise today's children to be more aware of their spiritual dimension?
That is a very, very difficult thing to do, and taking on the commitment of parenthood is an immense responsibility. And one of the reasons why it's so difficult is because when they go to school, their friends at school, if they start talking about Jesus as being a living presence in our life that we can commune with, and they know nothing about it, that will cause a lot of bullying and difficulty in their growing up. So this has to be a very subtle thing. Now what we did with we have two daughters. They're now in their mid-40s, late 40s. When they were little, we had a prayer sanctuary where I would take them on Sunday, usually Sunday evening, up to this prayer sanctuary and talk to them about Jesus and explain that he is, although he's not in a body, he is alive, he's in our life, and that we can go into our heart and communicate with him, talk to him. He's our dearest friend, and he will be there for us whenever we call out to him. Whenever we ask for help, he will be there. And so that didn't make a big deal out of it. And I said, this is where we really communicate in our own within, in our heart. You don't need to go out telling other people about it, because this is a one-on-one thing between us and Jesus. So they didn't go around like perhaps a lot of religious proselytizers saying, oh, you've got to hear about the real Jesus. And they kept it to themselves. And that has been a huge help.
Great. At which age do you think we could start to tell children about the other realms and worlds that exist?
I think about 5 or 6. It depends on the readiness of the child, because we all come into this life with a past from previous incarnations, and depending on where they've come from and what they've come to do, there are many souls who have come here bringing a lot of darkness, fear and guilt with them. And so they will be less ready to hear. You know, people think, well, we're afraid of the dark. When you're in the dark, it's the light that you're afraid of. And so people who are living in a state of spiritual darkness and have come into this life in spiritual darkness or from spiritual darkness, they will be afraid of spiritual light. So we've got to go very gently one step at a time.
You mentioned that you received the first book that you wrote verbatim. Is that the word? Verbatim?
Verbatim. It was an allegory which occupies the first 3 or 4 pages of this book. It's not the whole book.
So, but
it's called.
Do you write by channeling or
no? This is a conscious collaboration between me and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Now, I didn't know anything about the Holy Spirit until about 1995, and one Sunday morning, I had an experience where the room around me started to swirl like this, and it was as if there was a whirlwind, and I didn't know what was going on. And I said, "What is this? What's happening?" And the voice spoke to me. It was like, I don't know if you remember in children's storybooks, you may have the wind illustrated as a cloud with a face in it, and it's going, and that's the wind. And this voice spoke like this from a cloud. And the voice said, "I am the Spirit of Truth, the Holy Breath." And he said, "I have come to you from the Father in response to your question, because we had a little dog that had hurt her back. And I was debating, should I take her to the vet, or should I commit this into the care of Spirit for help?" So I committed it, and so this happened, where the voice spoke, saying, "I am the Spirit of Truth, the Holy Breath." And then he went on to say, "I have a message for you from the Father. You don't